Hello guys, welcome to the movie recap review. Happy watching.
The film begins with a close-up of an egg yolk being injected with a strange green liquid. The yolk splits in two, forming a perfect duplicate of itself. The scene then transitions to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, zooming in on the star of famed celebrity Elizabeth Sparkle. Time passes in a montage as adoring fans crowd around her star, but as the years roll by, Elizabeth gradually fades into obscurity, becoming an afterthought to the public. Elizabeth now hosts a once popular TV aerobics show called Sparkle It Up. After an awkward moment when she can't access the women's restroom, she sneaks into the men's room to hide. While there, she overhears the network president, Harvey, discussing plans to phase her out now that she's turned 50. Later, over lunch, Harvey, eating shrimp messily, breaks the news to Elizabeth, officially letting her go. While driving home, Elizabeth's attention is caught by the sight of her billboard being dismantled. Distracted and distressed, she crashes her car in a serious accident. Later, at the doctor's office, the nurse, after running some tests, remarks that Elizabeth is a perfect candidate for something unspecified. As Elizabeth prepares to leave, the nurse discreetly slips a flash drive into her jacket pocket. On her way out, Elizabeth runs into a man named Fred, who recognizes her from high school. He gushes about how she's still the most beautiful woman in the world, even though his compliments come off as overly eager and awkward. He insists on giving her his number before she can leave. Back at home, Elizabeth watches the flash drive's contents. It's an advertisement for something called the substance. A calm voice explains that the substance allows users to alternate between their younger, more vibrant selves and their current bodies, switching every 7 days with no exceptions. At first, Elizabeth dismisses the idea, unwilling to commit to such a drastic change. But as the loneliness and nostalgia for her past glory creep in, she eventually gives in, calling the number provided. On the other end, she's given nothing but an address and is asked to provide hers. Elizabeth receives an ID card in the mail, which leads her to a secluded address tucked away in a shady alley. The entrance opens to a hidden, nondescript building. Inside, she finds a deposit box marked with her assigned number. When she opens it, she retrieves a vial of the substance. Back at home, hesitant but desperate, Elizabeth injects herself with the same mysterious green fluid seen earlier. After a brief moment, she collapses in agony as her body begins to contort, and a large, unnatural slit tears open along her back. From the wound, a younger and stunning woman emerges. The younger version carefully sews up the slit in Elizabeth's back and administers a stabilizing fluid to both herself and the original Elizabeth body, maintaining a delicate balance between the two forms. Now going by the name Sue, the younger version quickly makes waves in Elizabeth's old world, even securing a place at her former TV network by charming Harvey and impressing the executives. She secures a full-time slot for her new fitness show, with Harvey agreeing to accommodate her peculiar schedule. Sue relishes the attention, thriving on the energy and excitement of being young, beautiful, and admired once again. Her first week is a whirlwind of success, fame, and adoration. But when Sue's time is up and she reverts to being Elizabeth, the stark contrast hits hard. Elizabeth's life feels even more mundane and empty, her days reduced to unremarkable routines. One of the few things she looks forward to is returning to the network, but only to pack up the last remnants of her old life and collect her belongings from Harvey. When Sue returns to her younger form, Sue makes secret arrangements to keep Elizabeth's body hidden, building a concealed room within her bathroom where she can stash the unconscious form of her older self. The construction noise, however, draws the attention of an irate neighbor who comes over to complain. But the moment he sees Sue, a stunning young woman rather than Elizabeth, he awkwardly backs down and clumsily attempts to flirt, to no avail. That night, Sue decides to go out for a night of fun, despite the looming deadline for her transformation. She brings home a man named Troy with plans to hook up, but just as things heat up, she starts to experience a nosebleed, an ominous sign that her time as Sue is running out. Desperate to stay young for just a bit longer, Sue recycles a used stabilizer tube and hurriedly extracts more fluid from Elizabeth's unconscious body. This allows her to extend her time as Sue long enough to spend the night with Troy, at the cost of further destabilizing the balance between her two forms. When Elizabeth wakes up, she's horrified to discover that the extra time spent as Sue has caused her right hand to age rapidly, looking frail and sickly. Alarmed, she calls the number for the substance, only to be sternly reminded that the damage is irreversible and that the balance between her two forms must be respected. The voice on the other end warns her not to think of Sue as a separate person, reminding her that Sue is just another version of herself. After receiving a refill kit, Elizabeth heads to a diner. There, she notices an old man with the same distinctive birthmark as the nurse who originally introduced her to the substance. The man unnerves her with cryptic warnings, telling her about the dangerous effects of prolonging her time as the younger version, and asks if Sue has started eating away at her yet. Panicked by the implications, Elizabeth bolts from the diner. As she returns to her building, she's confronted by Troy, who angrily yells at her while picking up his motorcycle. Feeling desperate, Elizabeth finds Fred's number and decides to take him up on his earlier offer for dinner. Fred enthusiastically accepts and makes a reservation. However, as Elizabeth gets ready to leave, she becomes fixated on the billboard for Sue's new show, visible from her window, with Sue's face staring back at her, mocking her in its youthful perfection. Overcome by frustration and envy, Elizabeth keeps returning to the bathroom, obsessively removing and reapplying her makeup, trying to recapture some sense of control over her appearance. Eventually, her bitterness overwhelms her, and she cancels the date without even contacting Fred, feeling trapped in her own decaying reality. During a taping of Sue's fitness show, she struggles with a bad take, distracted by an uncomfortable bulge pressing against her backside. Trying to ignore it, she quickly excuses herself and walks out before playback, dreading what might be happening. In the bathroom, Sue desperately pushes the lump up her leg and, to her horror, extracts a whole chicken leg from her belly button. Disturbed and frustrated, Sue calls the substance hotline, complaining about Elizabeth's binge drinking and eating, which is causing bizarre side effects. She expresses her frustration over barely having time to enjoy her life as Sue, while Elizabeth's habits worsen their condition. Later, Sue heads to the studio and discovers that her show's taping has been canceled. Fearing the worst, she confronts Harvey, who instead surprises her with good news. She's become so popular that the network wants her to host a New Year's Eve special. Overjoyed, Sue accepts, but her thirst for more fame drives her to extend her time as Sue, taking more than the usual 7 days away from Elizabeth. When Sue finally returns to Elizabeth's body, the damage is undeniable. Elizabeth has become grotesquely aged, her skin sagging, her legs frail and nearly useless. Barely able to walk, Elizabeth tries to keep herself occupied, cooking from a French cookbook that Harvey had given her long ago as a patronizing gesture. Each day, her resentment for Sue grows as she watches her younger self thrive on talk shows, gleefully mocking Elizabeth's old aerobics program and reveling in her newfound fame. Bitterness consumes Elizabeth, increasingly hating the woman she once was, now living a life she can only watch from the sidelines. In retaliation for Elizabeth's increasingly repulsive habits, Sue becomes desperate, spending 3 months extracting fluid from her older self. When Sue attempts to use the fluid one last time, it emerges necrotic and foul. Frantic, she calls the hotline, only to be informed that she has reached the end of her allotted time in her younger body. The voice reminds her that the stabilizing fluid will reset once she returns to Elizabeth's form. With no other option, Sue reluctantly decides to revert back to Elizabeth. But when she does, she's horrified to find that Elizabeth has transformed into a grotesque, hunchbacked abomination, a shadow of her former self. In that moment of despair, Elizabeth resolves to terminate the substance. While it won't reverse her current state, it will allow her to live the rest of her life as she is. Elizabeth injects a black fluid into a syringe, intending to administer it to Sue. She hesitates, pulling back just before using the entire syringe. As she stands there, Sue jolts awake, confusion giving way to rage when she sees Elizabeth before her. In a blind fury, Sue viciously attacks, slamming Elizabeth's face against a mirror again and again. Sue's relentless blows eventually lead to Elizabeth's demise. Sue rushes to the network, filled with excitement for the New Year's Eve special. However, as she prepares, her body begins to unravel in a grotesque manner. 3 of her front teeth suddenly fall out, her fingernails peel off painfully, and her left ear slides down her cheek, leaving her in a state of panic. Desperate to remedy the situation, she dashes back home, frantically searching for a solution. She discovers the vial of activator fluid, initially intended for one-time use. Hoping it will create another youthful body for her, Sue injects the fluid, but the outcome is horrific. Instead of a rejuvenated form, it births a grotesque creature she names Monstro Elisasu. This nightmarish being has multiple limbs, jagged teeth, but most disturbingly, it features Elizabeth's gasping face grotesquely affixed to its back. Monstro returns to the network, wearing a poster of Elizabeth's face taped over its own and fitting snugly into Sue's dress. As Monstro strides toward the stage, the mask slips off, exposing its grotesque features to the stunned audience. Harvey lunges at Monstro, but she quickly regenerates. In the chaos, one of its arms detaches, spraying a fountain of crimson goo across the crowd, drenching the entire room. Monstro escapes the studio, but it soon collapses, splattering into nothingness. From the remnants, a fleshy mass surfaces, adorned with Elizabeth's original face. She crawls toward her Walk of Fame star, her expression filled with joy as she envisions sparkles raining down around her. With a final smile, Elizabeth dissolves into a puddle of goo. By morning, a floor scrubber sweeps through, erasing the puddle entirely, leaving no trace of her behind.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.